Alex was 42 years old. For 15 of those years, he had been married to Chloe. For 10 of them, he had lived in the house he designed for her, for them. He had drawn the plans himself, late at night at a drafting table he'd owned since university. He had overseen the pouring of the foundation, watching the gray slurry fill the forms, ensuring it was level, true, and strong enough to hold the life they planned to build upon it. He had selected the timber, the stone, the slate for the roof. Every joint, every window placement, every sightline was a decision he had made. It was a house built of quiet, sustained, unglamorous effort. And then, on a Tuesday in October, after 15 years of marriage and a decade of shared life within those walls, Chloe announced she was hosting a dinner for her family. Just a small gathering, she had said. Her parents, her brother. A celebration. For what? She did not say. But Alex saw the answer in the architecture of her smile, a facade that did not align with the structure behind her eyes. He saw the hairline cracks in her composure, the kind of stress fractures that appear just before a catastrophic failure. He knew what this dinner was. It was not a celebration. It was a tribunal. What Alex did in the 72 hours before that dinner would cost Chloe and her family everything they thought they had secured. If you have ever felt underestimated, comment with your city or country below, and subscribe for more stories of quiet competence. He did not confront her. He did not ask what they were celebrating. He simply nodded, the way he always did. He watched her turn back to the counter, her shoulders held in a posture of practiced nonchalance. She was humming a tune from a commercial, a meaningless, cheerful string of notes that filled the space where an honest conversation should have been. For the rest of the evening, he moved through their shared spaces with the same deliberate economy he always had. He cleared his plate. He rinsed it and placed it in the dishwasher. He checked the locks on the doors, a nightly ritual. The deadbolt in the front door, the slide lock on the patio. He felt the cool, familiar brass under his thumb. He walked through the downstairs, his bare feet silent on the hardwood floors he had installed and finished himself. He could feel the faint vibration of the house's systems, the low hum of the refrigerator, the whisper of the HVAC unit in the basement. He was attuned to the building's rhythm, its lifeblood. He knew its sounds, its silences. He knew when something was wrong. He passed the living room, where Chloe was now on the phone, her voice a low, confidential murmur. He did not need to hear the words. He could read the intent in the cadence, in the way she held the phone close, her body angled away from the open door. It was the sound of conspiracy. He continued up the stairs, his hand grazing the smooth, cool plaster of the wall. He entered his study. It was a small room, dominated by the old drafting table and shelves of books on structural engineering and architectural history. He did not turn on the main light. He switched on the small brass lamp at his desk, casting a warm, focused pool of light on the worn wood surface. He sat not at the desk, but in the old leather chair in the corner, and he stared at the wall. For a long time, he did not move. He was not cataloging memories. He was inventorying facts. The dinner was Friday. Today was Tuesday. He had 3 days. He rose, finally, and walked to the filing cabinet in the corner. It was not locked. He had never felt the need. He pulled open the bottom drawer, the one marked house. Inside were deeds, warranties for appliances, blueprints, and contracts. He bypassed them all. His hand went to the very back, to a single, plain manila folder with no label. He had placed it there 6 weeks ago. He pulled it out. The folder was thin. It contained only a few sheets of paper. He did not open it. He did not need to review the contents. He knew them by heart. He carried the folder back to his desk, placed it in the center of the pool of light, and turned to look out the window into the dark, quiet street. The planning was over. Now came the execution. Alex's life was a study in controlled variables. He rose every morning at 5:30, not because an alarm told him to, but because his internal clock was set to that hour. He would drink a single cup of black coffee while standing at the kitchen window, watching the sky lighten from charcoal to bruised purple to a pale, hopeful gray. By 6:15, he was in his truck, a 10-year-old Ford F-150 that was meticulously maintained but never ostentatiously clean. It was a tool, not a statement. His work was building things that lasted. As an architect specializing in civic and infrastructure projects, he designed libraries, small municipal airports, and bridges. His designs were not flashy. They did not win glossy magazine awards. They were known for their durability, their efficiency, and their quiet, unobtrusive beauty. They were built to bear loads, to withstand weather, to serve a purpose for generations. He approached his life with the same principles. His friendships were few but deeply rooted. His word was a contract. His emotions were managed with the same rigor he applied to a complex stress analysis. Others, Chloe included, often mistook this control for a lack of passion. They saw his steadiness and read it as passivity. They saw his silence and assumed it was absence. They were wrong. His silence was not empty. It was filled with observation. He noticed everything. He noticed the way the morning light hit the east-facing wall of a new building. He noticed the sound a steel beam made when it settled under load. He noticed the way a contractor's foreman held his hands when he was lying about a deadline. At home, his observations were more intimate. He noticed the faint scent of a different soap on Chloe's skin. He noticed that she had started angling her laptop screen away from him when he entered a room. He noticed new clothes, new restaurants on credit card bills, a new, brittle brightness in her laugh. He did not document these things in a ledger. He did not create a spreadsheet of suspicions. He filed them internally, the way a foundation settles into the earth, a gradual, imperceptible shift that changes the distribution of weight across the entire structure. He had felt the foundation of his marriage shifting for 18 months. It began as a subtle tilt, a door that no longer closed as flush as it once had. Then came the fine, web-like cracks, a forgotten anniversary, a series of last-minute work dinners, the increasing frequency of calls from her mother, her father, her brother, calls that would end abruptly when he walked into the room. He did not react in real time. He did not issue provocations or demand explanations. To do so would be to reveal his position before he understood the full scope of the opposing strategy. He simply continued his routine. He rose at 5:30. He went to work. He came home. He maintained the house. He observed. His consistency was his greatest weapon because Chloe had never taken it seriously enough to see it as one. She saw it as a predictable, static landscape against which she could plot her new trajectory, confident that the ground beneath her feet would remain stable until she decided to leave it. It was a profound architectural error. She had failed to understand the material she was dealing with. The discovery, when it came, was not dramatic. It was mundane. It arrived in a plain white envelope, tucked into a stack of catalogs and junk mail. It was a Tuesday evening, 6 weeks before the dinner invitation. Chloe was at her weekly yoga class, in addition to her schedule that had begun a year ago. Alex was sorting the mail at the kitchen island. He had his stack, she had hers. He worked his way through his, a bill for his professional liability insurance, a journal from the American Institute of Architects, an offer for a new credit card. At the bottom of his pile, he found an envelope addressed to Chloe. It was from their shared credit card company, but it was for an account she held solely in her name. He had co-signed the initial application years ago to help her credit score, but he was not listed on the statements. It had been mixed in with his mail, a simple postal service error. He held it for a moment. He could have placed it on her stack, unopened. It would have been the civil thing to do. But civility is predicated on a shared understanding of the rules, and he had come to suspect the rules had been rewritten without his consultation. He slid his thumb under the flap and tore it open. The statement was a single page. He scanned the familiar list of charges: a local coffee shop, the grocery store, the gas station. And then, a charge from 4 days prior that made the air in his lungs feel heavy and cold. A single-line item for $25,000. The payee was listed as Abernathy, Thorne and Finch, LLP. Alex knew the name. You did not work in architecture and development in this city without knowing Abernathy, Thorne and Finch. They were not the lawyers you hired for a friendly, collaborative divorce. They were the lawyers you hired when you intended to burn the other side to the ground and salt the earth. They were tactical, aggressive, and expensive. $25,000 was not a fee. It was a retainer. It was the down payment on a war. He felt a pressure behind his sternum, a familiar sensation he associated with discovering a critical flaw in a set of structural drawings. It was not panic. It was the cold, clear recognition of a problem that required immediate, methodical attention. He folded the statement carefully along its original creases and slid it back into the envelope. He walked into the living room and slipped it into the middle of a magazine on the coffee table, a place she would find it eventually, assuming it had simply been misplaced. He returned to the kitchen. He finished sorting his mail. He made himself a cup of tea. He did not tremble. His heart rate did not spike. He simply processed the new data. The 18 months of subtle shifts, of unexplained absences, of brittle laughter, they were not random subsidences. They were a coordinated demolition, planned in secret. Chloe was not just leaving. She was preparing an attack. And she had paid $25,000 to ensure it was devastating. The knowledge did not shatter him. It focused him. He now had a defined problem, and with it, a starting point for the solution. The following Saturday, Alex did not go to a job site. He told Chloe he had to catch up on some paperwork at the office. She was in the garden, wearing new gloves, snipping away at the rose bushes with a proprietary air. "Don't work too hard," she said, smiling, the sun catching the highlights in her hair. It was a good performance. He drove to his firm's downtown office. The building was a quiet tomb on the weekend, cooled and silent. He let himself into his office, a corner space with views of the city's skyline. He did not turn on his computer. He did not unroll a single blueprint. Instead, he sat at his large oak desk and took out a plain legal pad. At the top of the page, he wrote, "What I know." Below it, he listed the facts as he understood them. 1. Chloe has retained Abernathy, Thorne and Finch. 2. Date of retainer, 6 weeks ago. 3. Amount, $25,000. 4. Abernathy specializes in high-conflict, asset-focused divorce. 5. This has been planned for at least 18 months. He paused, tapping the pen on the pad. Then he drew a line and wrote, "What I suspect. 1. The goal is not a 50-50th split. The choice of firm indicates a strategy of seizure. 2. The house is the primary target. 3. Her family, Father Richard, Brother Julian, are involved. Their recent financial advice, their sudden interest in his business, now seemed less like familial concern and more like reconnaissance. 4. There is likely another person involved. The soap, the late nights. But this was an emotional variable, not a structural one. He would set it aside for now. He drew another line. What I need to know." This list was longer. He needed a complete financial picture. Not just their shared accounts, but everything. He needed to understand what assets they were targeting and how. He needed to understand her family's role. Were they merely advisors, or were they co-conspirators? He sat for an hour, the pad in front of him, thinking in flowcharts and critical paths. At 10 o'clock, he picked up his phone and called his brother. Mark answered on the second ring. He was a forensic accountant in Chicago. They were not close in a demonstrative way, but their loyalty to each other was absolute, a load-bearing element of their lives. "Alex, everything okay?" Mark's voice was calm. "I need something," Alex said, his voice low and even. "It needs to be quiet, always." As Alex explained the situation in less than 200 words. He did not speak of betrayal or heartbreak. He spoke of retainers, law firms, and suspected asset movements. He was presenting a structural problem. Mark listened without interrupting. "They'll be looking at the business," Mark said finally. "Your firm is a partnership, but your capital account is a marital asset. They'll look at the value of your projects, your personal real estate holdings." The house is the main thing," Alex agreed. "I have the original deed, the construction loans, the receipts for every bag of concrete, and every box of nails. All paid from my premarital accounts or from my salary." "Good. But she'll claim sweat equity. Emotional contribution. They'll try to muddy the waters." Mark paused. "There's something else. Her brother, Julian. What does he do again?" "He calls himself a developer," Alex said. "Small time. Flips houses. Mostly uses his father's money." "Send me his full name and the name of his LLC," Mark said. "And the name of their father's primary holding company." "I'm just curious. I'll text it to you," Alex said. He did not ask why. He did not need to. Mark was already scanning the foundation for weaknesses Alex couldn't see from his vantage point. The call was over in less than 5 minutes. Information transferred. Call concluded. Alex spent the rest of the day in a digital archive, pulling every bank statement, every tax return, every wire transfer confirmation going back 15 years. He sorted them into chronological folders on a secure, encrypted hard drive. It was not an act of anger. It was the work of an architect preparing for a seismic event. He was documenting the structure as it was built, piece by piece, so that when the shaking started, he could prove what was his. In the week leading up to the dinner, Chloe was a marvel of unsettling normalcy. She was more affectionate than she had been in months. She would touch his arm as she passed him in the kitchen, a light, fleeting gesture that felt both intimate and utterly disconnected. She suggested they watch a movie one night, and she sat close to him on the sofa, her head resting on his shoulder. Alex could feel the tension in her neck, the rigid control in what was meant to be a relaxed posture. She was performing the role of a loving wife with the determined focus of an actress in a demanding part. He did not recoil from her touch. He did not challenge the performance. He simply allowed it to happen, making mental notes of the dissonance between the action and the intent. He was a spectator in his own life, watching a play whose ending he already knew. From the narrator's vantage point, dipping into Chloe's perspective, her confidence was breathtaking in its arrogance. She was on the phone with her mother, Eleanor, 2 days before the dinner. She was in her car, parked in a supermarket lot, the picture of suburban domesticity. "He has no idea, Mom," she said, her voice a triumphant whisper. "He's just plodding along. Same as always. He went to his office all day Saturday. Probably drawing another boring library," she laughed, a sound like ice chipping. "It's almost sad. But this is for the best. My lawyer said it's better this way. A single, clean break. The shock will make him more compliant." Her mother's voice was a soothing murmur on the other end. "Your father and Julian have reviewed the proposal. It's ironclad. The house is the centerpiece. We've established your contributions, the sacrifices you made for his career. It's a strong narrative, and the business?" Chloe asked. "Julian's contact says Alex's firm is about to land the new airport expansion. The valuation will skyrocket. The timing is perfect." They saw Alex not as a man, but as a resource to be optimized. His steadiness was not a virtue, it was a vulnerability. His lack of outward reaction was not control, it was ignorance. Every calculation they made was based on this fundamental misreading of his character. They had built their entire strategy on a flawed foundation. While Chloe was confirming her battle plans in a parking lot, Alex was receiving an email from his brother. It was a single, heavily encrypted file. The subject line was blank. Alex opened it in his study. It contained a flowchart, a series of interconnected boxes and lines tracing the flow of money. It showed a shell corporation registered in Delaware that had been established 6 months prior. That corporation had recently purchased a parcel of undeveloped land on the outskirts of the city. The land was adjacent to the proposed site of the new municipal airport expansion project, a project Alex's firm was indeed the frontrunner to win. The name on the incorporation documents for the shell company was not Chloe's. It was her brother's, Julian, and the funds used to purchase the land, a sum of $150,000, had not come from their father's holding company. The transfer had originated from a secondary account linked to a construction project Alex had recently completed, an account Chloe had access to. It was embezzlement, clean and simple. But it was also something more. It was insider trading, using confidential information about Alex's business for personal gain. Alex printed the flowchart and the wire transfer confirmation. He placed them in the plain manila folder. The pieces were fitting together. Chloe wasn't just leaving him and taking the house. She and her family were using him, leveraging his life's work to enrich themselves, and planning to leave him with the bill. He closed the folder. The weight in his hands felt solid, real. It was the weight of consequence. The night of the dinner arrived like a cold front moving in. The air in the house grew heavy, charged with unspoken words. Alex showered and dressed in a simple dark gray sweater and black trousers. He looked in the mirror. His face was calm. His eyes were clear. There was no trace of the storm raging beneath the surface. He was the eye of his own hurricane. Chloe came into the bedroom wearing a red dress. It was new. She looked stunning, and she knew it. It was a power color, a declaration. "How do I look?" she asked, turning for his approval. "You look lovely," he said. The words were true, in a detached, observational way. The dress was a beautiful piece of design. The woman wearing it was a stranger. He went downstairs to wait. He stood by the large picture window in the living room, the one that looked out over the garden he had planted and the stone wall he had built. He watched the headlights of a car sweep across the lawn. Her family had arrived. First came Richard, Chloe's father, a man who carried his wealth like a shield. He was handsome, silver-haired, with the easy confidence of someone who had never faced a problem money couldn't solve. He clapped Alex on the shoulder, a gesture that was meant to seem friendly but felt like an assessment. Alex, good to see you. House is looking solid as ever, Richard, Alex said, his voice even. Next was Eleanor, the mother. Her face was a mask of gentle concern, but her eyes darted around the room, taking inventory. She hugged Alex, a brief, papery embrace. Thank you for having us, Alex. It's so good to get together. Finally, there was Julian, the brother. He was a younger, cheaper version of his father. He wore a suit that was too shiny and a smile that didn't fit his face. He shook Alex's hand limply. Big night, Julian said with a smirk, a co-conspirator telegraphing the punchline. They gathered in the living room. Chloe served wine, her movements fluid and graceful. She was the gracious hostess, the master of ceremonies. The conversation was a masterpiece of banality. They talked about the weather. They talked about a recent political scandal. They talked about a vacation Richard and Eleanor were planning. Alex participated just enough to maintain the illusion of normalcy. He answered direct questions with short, precise answers. He nursed a single glass of water. He was a quiet observer at his own carefully staged execution. They moved to the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the one they used only for Christmas and anniversaries. Chloe had prepared a roast chicken. The smell filled the room, a scent of manufactured domesticity. As they ate, Richard began to steer the conversation. He started asking Alex about his work, about the firm. Here things are going well, Richard said, carving a piece of chicken. That new airport project, that'd be a big one for you, wouldn't it? It's a competitive bidding process, Alex said, not taking the bait. Nothing is certain, of course, Richard said, sharing a look with Julian. But a man with your reputation, you have to be the favorite. They were probing, trying to get him to confirm the valuation they had already assumed. The dramatic irony was a physical presence in the room, a ghost at the table that only Alex could see. He ate his food slowly. He listened. He waited. The main course was cleared. Chloe stood, a wine glass in her hand. The performance was about to begin. Chloe did not propose a toast. She held her glass, but did not raise it. She looked around the table, her eyes landing on each member of her family, a silent acknowledgement of their alliance. She saved her final gaze for Alex. It was a practiced look, a blend of sorrow and resolve that she had likely rehearsed in front of a mirror. I wanted to have you all here tonight, she began, her voice steady, because this is my family, my foundation, and I need you with me as I take a difficult but necessary step. She placed her glass on the table. The small click of crystal on wood was the only sound in the room. Alex, she said, her voice softening into a tone of deep, fraudulent regret. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. We've had 15 years. We've built a life. But we're no longer on the same path. We want different things. We have grown into different people. It was a monologue filled with the sterile, blameless language of therapy and self-help books. It was designed to sound reasonable, mature, and inevitable. It was a lie from start to finish. Her father, Richard, nodded gravely, playing his part as the supportive patriarch. Her mother, Eleanor, produced a handkerchief and dabbed at a tear that wasn't there. Julian stared at Alex with an expression of smug pity. I will always be grateful for the life we shared, Chloe continued, her voice gaining strength as she moved toward her objective. But I can't live in it anymore. I need to be true to myself. So, I am leaving. She paused for effect, letting the weight of the declaration settle. Alex did not react. He did not speak. He simply watched her, his expression unreadable. His stillness unnerved her. She had expected an outburst, a protest, a plea. His silence was not in the script. She pushed forward, reaching for a large, professionally bound document that had been sitting beside her chair. It was navy blue, with the gold-embossed lettering of Abernathy, Thorne and Finch on the cover. My lawyer has drawn up a separation agreement, she said, her voice becoming more businesslike. I wanted to do this face-to-face, to be transparent. It's all in here. A proposal for the division of assets. I think you'll find it's more than fair. She slid the heavy document across the polished surface of the dining room table. It stopped precisely in front of Alex's plate. It was a declaration of war disguised as a peace treaty. It was the culmination of her 18-month plan. She sat back in her chair, her work done. She had delivered the blow. Now she and her family would watch him crumble. They waited. Alex looked at the navy blue binder. He did not touch it. He did not open it. He let it sit there, a monument to their arrogance. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his water. The silence stretched, growing taut and uncomfortable for everyone but him. Finally, he looked up, not at Chloe, but at her father. "Is this the part where you explain how her emotional contributions entitle her to the house I paid for with premarital funds?" he asked. His voice was quiet, almost conversational. Richard was taken aback. "Now, Alex, let's not get contentious. This is about fairness. Or is this the part," Alex continued, his gaze shifting to Julian, "where you tell me it's just business?" He then turned his eyes to Chloe. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He did not pull out a competing legal binder. He did not have a stack of papers. He withdrew the single, thin manila folder. He opened it on his lap, below the level of the table. He took out one sheet of paper. Just one. He placed it on the table and slid it across the wood. It was not a legal document. It was a simple, one-page bank record. It came to a stop next to Chloe's expensive, imposing binder. "Let's start here," Alex said. His voice was not raised. It was not angry. It was the voice of a man stating an undeniable fact. "This is a wire transfer confirmation for $150,000 from our joint construction account to a shell corporation registered in Delaware. The transfer happened 3 months ago. Was that before or after you decided we had grown apart?" The question hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Chloe stared at the single sheet of paper as if it were a venomous snake. The color drained from her face. Her performance of sorrowful resolve evaporated, replaced by the first flicker of raw panic. I don't know what that is," she stammered, looking to her father for a rescue that would not come. Richard leaned forward, squinting at the paper. He saw the name of the shell corporation. He saw the name of his son, Julian, as the registered agent. His blustering confidence faltered. "This is some kind of misunderstanding," Richard began, his voice attempting authority but finding none. "Julian, what is this?" Julian, for his part, looked as if he had been struck. His smug expression had been wiped clean. It's a business investment, Dad. It has nothing to do with this, an investment," Alex said, his voice still unervingly calm. He reached back into his manila folder and retrieved a second sheet of paper. He placed it on the table next to the first. It was a map, a plat survey of a large parcel of land. Red lines marked the property boundaries. "An investment in this specific piece of land, I assume? The one directly adjacent to the proposed airport expansion? The project my firm is the lead bidder on." He let that question sit for a moment. He looked at Eleanor, whose manufactured sympathy had curdled into confusion and fear. He looked at Richard, who was now staring daggers at his son. He looked at Julian, who was visibly sweating. Finally, he looked back at Chloe. "You must have great confidence in my firm's ability to win that contract," Alex said. "To risk $150,000 of our money on it, our money." Chloe choked out the words. That was from my business account, the account for your interior design business?" Alex asked. "The one that hasn't landed a client in 3 years?" "No. That money came from the final payment on the Northwood Library project. My project. A payment that was deposited into our joint construction account. The one you had access to for household expenses." He reached into the folder a third time. He pulled out another document. A signed, notarized affidavit. He placed it on the growing pile of evidence. "This is an affidavit from the project contractor, confirming the date and amount of the final payment. He was also kind enough to provide a copy of the email you sent him, directing him to deposit it into that specific account, rather than my firm's primary operating account. You told him it was for tax efficiency purposes. The trap was closing. Every document was a steel door slamming shut, cutting off another escape route. The family's unified front had shattered. Richard was no longer looking at Alex as a target, but at his own children as liabilities. "Julian, you idiot," Richard hissed under his breath. "I told you to use my funds. I told you to keep it clean." The admission, a quiet, furious whisper, was louder than a shout. He had just confessed his own complicity. He knew about the land deal. He was in on it. Eleanor let out a small, wounded sound. The carefully constructed image of her perfect family was disintegrating in real time. Alex ignored them. His focus remained on Chloe. He had one more document. He slid it out of the folder. It was a printout of the flowchart his brother had made. A clean, clinical diagram of their deceit. "This is how you did it," he said, placing it on the top of the pile. The money from my project into the joint account, wired to Julian's shell company, to buy the land my confidential business dealings made valuable. This isn't a divorce proposal, Chloe. This is grand larceny. And insider trading. That's a federal offense. He leaned back in his chair. He had said what needed to be said. He had not raised his voice. He had not used a single curse word. He had simply laid the facts on the table, one by one, like a builder laying stones for a foundation that would not crack. The aftermath did not arrive with shouting or with slammed doors. It arrived with a thick, suffocating silence. The four of them, Chloe, Richard, Eleanor, and Julian, were frozen, pinned in place by the architecture of their own failed conspiracy. Chloe's face had collapsed. The confident, radiant woman in the red dress was gone, replaced by a pale, hollow-eyed stranger. She looked at the documents on the table.